NVIDIA reports first quarter results after the bell today. Check out that chart. You can see that it has rebounded nicely. Join us now on what to expect. Expect Ben Reitzes, who's Melius head of technology research. Big numbers expected, but I don't know, how big do they have to be? Are there whisper numbers? Like it's a 66% revenue gain year over year as expected, 50% plus gain in the bottom line. Well, if it does that, is that enough to move the stock higher, or are there even more bullish expectations?
Actually, this is one of those quarters that there's a bit of a nuance because there was a China write-off for $5.5 billion. So revenue sequentially, right? So the guidance is really all that matters. They usually beat by 2 or 3 billion. You know, I wouldn't be shocked to see a couple billion-ish, maybe a little less this time. Actually, gaming was really good and data center, but the guidance is all that matters, really. And there's a loss of 4 to 5 billion in revenue from China for the July quarter, which is going to complicate guidance. But I think they're going to sound really good, Joe, because they're on the right side of Trump right now. And that's the big change from 90 days ago, is that they have an ally in the White House who's cutting deals, and sovereign AI is going through the roof.
So what we highlighted by talking about what the president said about Tim Cook, you think that the counter to that was he was comparing Tim Cook to Jensen Huang, who was there with him. So just being there with him puts NVIDIA on the right side of the White House?
Well, in terms of the Middle East,
kind of, yes.
In terms of the Middle East, though, they have aspirations to create these AI factories and take their excess energy and turn it into
just
tokens.
In terms of kissing the ring and
kissing the ring.
Yeah,
but
that helps.
It helps, but I don't know what Tim Cook would have done there. I mean, Tim Cook going to Saudi Arabia, it's a small market for iPhones. They're not going to make iPhones there, but they're actually going to make AI in the Middle East.
Don't you think he wishes you went at this point?
Maybe he does. I wouldn't count Tim Cook out. Now, Tim, but Jensen right now is the most favored son of the U.S., and it's great to see. He's a great guy, and he's invented, and curated this whole AI boom. Now, Tim Cook, on the other hand, he's got a tougher hand because he built this whole thing in China. iPhone's a consumer device. It has nothing to do with the Middle East, really. And I wouldn't count him out. He's a good diplomat. He's operational excellence. The death of Apple's greatly exaggerated.
Okay.
Mizuho stated that as NVIDIA prepares to release its earnings, investors are paying more attention to long-term momentum linked to Blackwell and China updates than they are to this quarter's guidance. Based on buy-side input, the firm concluded that the July quarter guide counts far less than usual because of the anticipated loss of H20 revs in China. The CEO or CFO's remarks on the call regarding a possible ramp in the output of the Blackwell GB200 rack system and an acceleration of rev recognition into the October quarter will be far more significant for the stock and investor sentiment. NVIDIA shares are practically at the same price as they were in mid-June of last year, despite a 23% increase since April 1st, according to Mizuho. If the firm can above expectations in outlook, Blackwell, or new China revenues, it could be a good time to buy. Analysts for the company also stated that they are beginning to worry a little because the stock has increased so much in recent weeks. The setup feels more difficult at the high $130 price level than it does at the $100, $110 level. However, they added, gun to head, suggesting that I would like to be long rather than short the stock today going into the print. Investor enthusiasm over the new B20 China GPU, which is viewed as a possible offset to H20 losses, confirmation that gross margins are returning to the mid-70s in a few quarters, and heightened confidence in a 2H ramp for Blackwell are anticipated to be some of the major drivers following earnings. Morgan Stanley analyst Joseph Moore kept his price target of $160 and his rating of buy for NVIDIA. Despite the difficulties NVIDIA is now facing, Moore's rating shows faith in the company's shares. The company has specifically had to cope with the H20 chip prohibition, which prohibits it from selling its chips to China. An up-close look at a vibrant, high-end graphics card connected to a gaming PC. Consensus estimates have not fully taken into consideration how the ban has affected NVIDIA's sales in the nation. According to the company, it has also resulted in a substantial inventory write-down. Nonetheless, it is anticipated that NVIDIA's management would lessen this effect by enhancing the availability of other products, including the Blackwell line. Moore added that although the H-20 prohibition is a temporary obstacle, there is still a strong market for other goods. The shortage of Blackwell products is anticipated to improve. Moore's upbeat prognosis is further supported by favorable remarks made by major tech companies like Microsoft and Amazon on growth prospects. So, what implications does this have for NVIDIA's stock? Let's explore that. But first, a big thank you to those of you who've stuck with us this far. Creating these videos takes significant effort and dedication, so if you're enjoying the content, please hit the like button, subscribe to our channel, and share your thoughts on NVIDIA stock in the comments. Your support truly helps us grow. Now let's get back to the video.
Talk a little bit about what could potentially be the belle of the ball. We've got NVIDIA set to report results after the close today. First up, I'm curious to hear what your expectation is.
Yeah, I mean, my expectations are probably the same as everyone. I mean, they're going to have a blowout. The question is it going to be enough to move the needle? You know, should NVIDIA be trading at the February highs before, you know, the whole tariff mess? Should they be trading at the January highs? I don't know with all the mess that's going on with China that the guidance is going to be enough. You know, if it isn't, we'll be buying the dip. But, you know, if it is, you could take out the February, the January highs.
Stake for the broader market if NVIDIA disappoints even slightly.
Yeah, I mean, what we're really concerned about in looking at is what these earnings say about the entire kind of AI ecosystem. You know, DeepSeek was a shot across the bow for AI infrastructure. So on the Mag 7 names, we've really focused in on, you know, is it safe to get back into AI infrastructure? So far, they've said yes. You know, NVIDIA is the 800-pound gorilla here. You know, if you look at all the areas of AI that we know are going to be the future, they all need NVIDIA. NVIDIA is going to have, you know, their finger on the demand. And that's what I'm going to be most concerned about, because I think that's going to have most impact on the market as a whole.
Okay, so speaking of the 800-pound gorilla, data center revenue is obviously essentially an 800-pound gorilla for NVIDIA, though obviously there are other drivers as well, but that's a significant driver there. What are you paying attention to when it comes to demand, especially from, say, the likes of the hyperscalers like Meta, like Microsoft there?
Yeah, I mean, that's the key focus. We're going to be looking at, you know, data center. That's like 75, 80% of the revenue right now. Street's expecting 21 billion. Love to see more than that. You know, demand for the Blackwell GPUs. You know, we really want to focus in on, you know, that demand. What, you know, what are they seeing now? What are they forecasting? That's going to give us a much better idea. I mean, we've been getting back into AI infrastructure, so, you know, certainly don't want to see disappointments there.
Okay. And then I'm curious to know your thoughts on, or what you're expecting with regard to how they're addressing the more strenuous chip controls when it comes to China. You know, you heard rare comments from Jensen Huang about just criticizing the extent of those chip controls. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, we wrote about that in our newsletter a week or so back. You know, that's going to be an important kind of NVIDIA specific item. And, you know, and that's why I say these earnings are probably going to be messy because of what's going on with China. You know, I want to hear what they've got to say about that. My sense is we're not going to really get full clarity yet because, you know, nobody really knows what's going on with these tariffs and, you know, in some of these restrictions, and Trump can kind of change it on a dime. But, you know, that's certainly something we're going to be paying attention to that's, you know, more NVIDIA specific. And, you know, again, longer term, we think you've got to own this stock. I would be buying a dip if what they say is, you know, a little bit less than what people were thinking.
Okay, so you would buy a dip if it's a little bit less. What would it take, though? You mentioned the tariff noise that's still lingering there, and NVIDIA's obviously clawed back a lot of those Liberation Day losses. What would it take in terms of an upside surprise to really see some momentum?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just really blowout guidance. It's a high bar. I mean, could they do it? Yes, they could. Do I have a hard time wrapping my head around trading at, all-time highs when all this other stuff is going on? I do. But if anyone can pull a rabbit out of the hat, it's Jensen.
Okay, so you make a great point. And look, in the past, one of the challenges for NVIDIA hasn't really been about supply, it's demand and meeting the needs that are out there. Do you expect that to still be a theme, that it's more about just addressing the demand that's there?
Yeah, I mean, to me, that's the big theme. Is the demand as much as we think it is? And, again, NVIDIA is a great stock. It's a must own, but I think the action is really in all the AI infrastructure names. And if the demand isn't there, those names take a hit. If the demand is there, those are the areas I think you really, NVIDIA, again, you've got to own, but the AI infrastructure names are where you really are going to get the most bang for your buck.
Okay, all right.
As NVIDIA is ready to release its earnings today, all eyes are on the company. What makes the report so significant? Due to a few factors. Over the last 2 years, NVIDIA has dominated a sector that has boosted the stock market, and investors are searching for unambiguous clues about the future. I'm referring to artificial intelligence, AI, a technology that, from an innovation standpoint, some believe has the potential to become the next telephone or internet. The world's top producer of AI processors, which are the engines driving this whole revolution, is NVIDIA. Therefore, NVIDIA's statements could have a significant impact on other businesses in the AI area, as well as on this behemoth. Additionally, given the recent challenges, from President Trump's import tax plan to the government's limits on chip exports to China, this most recent earnings report can be very important. Due to these factors, NVIDIA's stock fell as much as 29% between the beginning of the year and the beginning of April. As of May 23rd, NVIDIA stock was down roughly 2% for the year, although shares have since recovered on indications that import duties won't be as harsh as first anticipated. Let's now think about what investors and NVIDIA should be on the lookout for during this impending significant event. First, it's crucial to remember that NVIDIA has a history of exceeding analysts' earnings projections, and investors are keen to see whether this trend continues, especially as the firm is still in the Blackwell architecture launch phase. Investors want to see if NVIDIA has been able to maintain a gross margin in the low 70% level, consistent with its previous projections, because new product rollouts can be expensive. This would demonstrate sustained high sales profitability. Recent earnings announcements from NVIDIA's clients, like Meta Platforms and Alphabet, have given us encouraging news. They are adhering to their capital spending commitments for the year. Meta even raised its budget projection. To stay informed about the latest developments from NVIDIA and the ever-changing stock market, consider subscribing to our investing tutorial channel. We provide daily updates on significant market shifts and key catalysts, so hit that subscribe button to ensure you never miss crucial information. We'd love to hear your thoughts on NVIDIA stock, so please share your opinions in the comments below. Now, let's dive into today's video.
$3 billion. I mean, they're both. I don't know how you grow a $3.3 billion market cap company. Trillion. Sorry, Jesus. Yeah, trillion. 3.3 trillion for NVIDIA. What is it? Is it going to be a $5 trillion company?
There's a really, really good chance, Joe. This company has a TAM, they say, of $1 trillion potentially. I think it's bigger than that. And the reason is that they are created a lot of the architecture and stack for the next generation of the data center, from the hyperscaler down to the enterprise. Enterprise hasn't really even gotten going yet. So their share of data center CapEx is going to go up, and it's going to be huge. Now, if there's $1 trillion a year, let's say, in a couple of years, what's NVIDIA's share? It could be up to half. It could be, and I think it's bigger than $1 trillion, because there's a whole new paradigm in terms of how we compute and how we use AI. And software is becoming AI factories. So the factories create tokens, they create software. It's a huge market. It's probably impossible to calculate.
So what do we listen for?
What we listen for is a change of 90 days ago, even at their GTC, I don't think they had any idea what was going on with Trump. Now they know he was with him in the Middle East. And I think we want to hear about sequential growth after this quarter when they take the China hit. If they're optimistic about sequential growth, the street's looking for double digits. And then we want to hear if calendar 26 is a growth year. And there's so much more information now than there was available even 2 months ago. That's really the key. And I think that the street's expectations for next year are very conservative, 25% or so growth in the data center business. They might be able to crush that.
Ben, if you're so convinced that he is most favored son right now and in so tight with the Trump administration, is there any chance that the H20 rulings would get reversed, that they'd be able to sell into the China market, or is that just off the table, gone forever?
I was in Taiwan very recently, and there was a buzz there. Oh, there's going to be a chip. There's going to be a chip, but it can't be based on what the H20 was. Right. And NVIDIA, already wrote it off, and now you saw the Reuters article, and there's talks that there will be a chip. I think that there is a turn in momentum. I'm not sure which quarter they get a chip ready for China, but if there's a China deal with the Trump administration, I would not be shocked if NVIDIA is part of it. And it's like, hey, you can have a lower end chip, because I think they've gotten through to Trump and his team that the world needs to be on a U.S. stack for AI rather than a Chinese stack. And I think that's resonating with the president after spending so much time with Jensen.
Really?
I do.
You can have it, but you just can't have what we have. I think.
Well, at least you have something, and we know what's going on. And they're 50%, according to Jensen, 50% of the AI researchers are Chinese or in China.
The question is, does that slow them down from trying to produce their own? The mother of invention is a very powerful force. And I would argue that actually a lot of what Huawei has managed to do is a function of the mother of invention, right? They've been sort of forced into a corner. They got to figure it out. If we give them these chips, you could argue maybe it means they don't have to figure it out as quickly. That could actually be helpful to us.
Yeah. I think it's helpful that perhaps but I think it's the whole stack. I think it's using software, using, developing, having more people developing Dakuda, developing on the NVIDIA platform a trusted U.S. entity that everybody's familiar with in this country, I think is a big advantage rather than wild, wild west, seeing what the developers do with Huawei and creating this whole separate ecosystem.
By the way, you for or against open source, given your views about China?
I'm for it. I think that DeepSeek, I think DeepSeek was some good innovations. Anyway, there were some really good innovations there that then everybody can adopt and move the industry forward. And I think that I do like the open source, and I think it will be very useful for enterprise adoption. But I think it'll be a mix. There'll be a few closed and an open as well. I think it fosters innovation, guys.
To ensure that these expenditure plans will actually help NVIDIA, it's important to pay attention to any relevant demand-related remarks made during NVIDIA's reporting. These clients are probably going to keep spending money on NVIDIA goods and services. But there are rivals, and some NVIDIA clients might even be rivals since they have developed their own AI chips. Any remarks regarding exports to China should also be kept an eye out for. Earlier in the quarter, NVIDIA announced that it will incur a $5.5 billion penalty for the H20 chip it built for the Chinese market. Recently, the United States stopped selling the product, claiming that NVIDIA required an export license. According to press sources, NVIDIA is looking into alternative strategies to sustain its market share in China, which accounted for 13% of sales in the most recent fiscal year. For instance, according to Reuters, which cited people familiar with the project, NVIDIA intends to introduce new chips for China and might begin mass manufacturing as early as next month. Lastly, NVIDIA might provide additional information about that endeavor after announcing a fresh investment in U.S. manufacturing a few weeks ago. Electronics are now exempt from Trump's tariffs, but the president has stated that he intends to impose charges on these goods in particular. Although NVIDIA has historically relied on Taiwanese production, the company now hopes to bring more and more of this domestically. It will be crucial to observe how these changes impact NVIDIA's cost structure and whether any effects will be noticeable now or in the future. 2 U.S. factories should begin ramping up within a year to 15 months, according to NVIDIA. Since NVIDIA has established itself as a leading indicator of the tech sector, this week's earnings report may provide guidance for both its stock and the shares of other tech companies. Despite the significance of this earnings release, investors should keep in mind that it only provides a short-term view of NVIDIA and the overall state of the AI business. Therefore, you could benefit from holding this leading AI company along with other high-quality tech companies in the long run, regardless of whether NVIDIA surprises to the upside or not. Don't forget to share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. Your input helps create a more knowledgeable community where we can all learn and grow together in the world of investing. Stay up to date with the latest market trends, insights, and key updates by subscribing to Investing Tutorial. We're here to help you make smarter investment decisions and stay ahead of the curve.
All right, so Christina just kind of hit on it just a second ago. The implied options move for NVIDIA after earnings about 7.5%, either to the upside or to the downside. Obviously, either move would have broader market implications. Also, the market given the NVIDIA basically a pass for that $5.5 billion charge, even though it's $5.5 billion. In your mind, what are your expectations for not only NVIDIA, but also the market reaction?
Yeah, I'm pretty optimistic about it. I mean, obviously, there's two main things the market wants to hear about. One is AI demand. We've seen a rebound in these AI names over the last month plus. And so that narrative is really important for the market going forward. And then on the other hand, they're linked directly to trade with China. We've obviously had these trade headwinds. So I think that any progress on that front will be really important. And obviously, they're working on circumventing some of those rules. The Trump administration seems more willing at least to work with NVIDIA than some other tech companies that have come in their sightlines. So I'm optimistic. I think it's going to be a good quarter, and I think that the guidance for the full year will be even better and enough to get the market behind this AI theme again.
Yeah, a lot of people worried about that guidance for the current quarter, especially. What are the market implications? We just touched on what NVIDIA and what you expect from NVIDIA. But what about the broader market implications? If you look since the start of Q2, which basically aligns from when the president announced tariffs, what he calls Liberation Day, you see tech and communication services both up double digits, leading the markets. This NVIDIA report, does that extend that move to the upside, or does it put more money in other parts of the market, maybe secondary plays?
I think that's the big story of the last couple of months, right? Kind of quietly, tech and comm services and some of these AI names have been relative laggards, not just this year, but prior to the election. Since the middle of 2024, you'd had some cyclical leadership, financials, industrials. And over the last 6 weeks, you've really seen the AI trade come back. So I think NVIDIA, I think the narrative is going to be exciting, and I think it's going to put some wind in that sails. And for the market implications, I mean, for anybody that's invested in these cap-weighted indexes, it's massive because these names are still so huge, even as they've pulled back a little bit from all-time highs and concentrations. So it's massive for the market, and it's massive for this narrative around AI, even if materially not all that much changes.